Golic and Wingo with you. Glad you're with us on a Friday as we get set for our championship Sunday in the NFL. But, of course, we're still talking about what the heck's going on in Major League Baseball. As baseball Twitter was ablaze yesterday. I mean ablaze after Carlos Beltran became the third manager to lose his job in wake of what went on in Houston in 2017 in the sign-stealing scandal. And then people started looking at videos of Jose Altuve in 2019 and closing up that jersey of the walk-off homer of Aroldis Chapman. People like Trevor Bauer, Alex Wood, Evan Longoria all weighing in about how bad they think this sign-stealing scandal is compared to steroids and everything else. This thing is not over, and it's not going to be over until every single one of those Houston Astros goes to training camp and has a microphone put in their face, and they have to answer some stuff. And that'll happen in a couple of weeks. But we decided to put a microphone and a camera in front of somebody we like talking to a lot about this stuff. And we are ready to go. And we're delighted to talk to Mark Teixeira, our fine ESPN baseball analyst. Mark, we're trying to put into some perspective this morning just how big of a scandal this is. When you hear certain pitchers say, I would rather face somebody on steroids than someone who knew what pitch was coming, in your opinion, how big of a deal is this?
If I was a pitcher, I wouldn't want to face a guy who knew what was coming. I mean, that's the only thing that the pitchers have an advantage over for the hitters. That strike zone is small. The balls are hard. These ballparks are small. The only way as a pitcher that I can get you out consistently is by changing pitches. Fastball, breaking ball, inside, outside, changeup, slider, four-seamer, cutter. As a hitter, if I know it's coming, I have a huge advantage. And it's not just, picking up on a signal here and there from a catcher. It's almost every single pitch. I have a sound coming from the dugout, and I know it's coming. Man, that's going to make the game a lot easier for a hitter.
Mark, as far as the investigation, baseball said they already looked into the devices that were on players and they found no evidence of it. And you, as well as everybody, saw how Twitter blew up yesterday with all of the talk about it. Do you think baseball should reopen that investigation, and do you think they will?
I think they should. I think they will. I think, this is one of those things that you don't want to let this scandal to spin out of control to the point where 2-3 years down the line, we're still talking about it because little bits of information are coming out. All it takes is one disgruntled Astros employee to blow the whole lid on all of this. And so, or another Mike Fiers. And I commend Mike Fiers for coming out and finally saying something here. But if Major League Baseball just kind of lets it go from here, and it does come out that there were more devices, buzzers underneath shirts, I think that would be bad for all of baseball.
Talking to Mark Teixeira with us, our ESPN Major League Baseball analyst on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Mark, in that regard, if this keeps going, because we are hearing from more and more players now who are saying that they have heard about instances of it, talking about what a big deal this is. When we compare this to the use of steroids, the way that it was brought up by Alex Wood, is this on par with that as far as a level of scandal for baseball if it continues to go down this road?
I think for the players, it is almost worse. The steroid scandal was terrible. The guys that weren't doing it, we were all completely up in arms about the lack of discipline and how guys were getting by. But the difference here is that you had pretty much every team was a part of the steroid scandal. I mean, during the height of the steroid era, you have to think that a couple guys on every single team was doing it. So from that standpoint, it's a level playing field. In this case, when it's the Astros and maybe the Red Sox, we will see, but there's only one or two teams that are overtly cheating in such a bad way. That really hurts the balance of power at the top of the American League. When you have the Astros and the Red Sox are the two teams that were cheating, and we know that the Astros got hammered for this. If I'm the New York Yankees, if I'm the Texas Rangers or Seattle Mariners, in that division, I don't really feel good about it. From a steroid perspective, I think the difference is that, a lot of teams are a part of this. So, players, we're going to internally be really upset, but we're not going to go public about it.
So, Tex, that leads me to the next question because we know that it was the Houston Astros. We believe Major League Baseball is going to show that the Red Sox were doing something as well. But do we really believe it was just those teams?
Yeah, that's a great point. I do believe that there's going to be more information coming out. every baseball team, every baseball player tries to find an edge. And most guys, the vast majority of players and coaching staffs go right up to the edge of what is breaking the rules. There will be a few coaches and players that do break the rules. And if we think it's just the Astros and the Red Sox that we're just going over that line, I think we're being a little bit naive. Now, I hope it's not too many teams, but this is not over.
Mark Teixeira is joining us, former baseball player and now our analyst. Mark, Rob Manfred said and did not discipline any ball players in this. And I'm paraphrasing from his statement, basically said it would be impractical and basically too hard to do, trying to figure out who did what. Is that a mistake? Should the ball players been punished?
It's not a mistake because I think Rob's right. It's impossible to try to look at every single player on that team and say you're guilty of this really bad action. I bet there's a player or two on that team that say, "Hey guys, this is wrong. I'm not going to be a part of it. If I'm up to the plate, don't bang on that trash can, or just keep me out of this," because it was so wrong. It's not like all the Astros players got together and were like, "Man, we're doing a great service. Let's write a book about this and teach kids how to cheat at baseball." They knew they were doing something wrong. And so if you're a player that's on the edge and saying, "I don't really want to be doing this," but your teammates have that peer pressure and your coaches are telling you, "Hey, this is what we do here." Imagine if you're a AAA player that got called up for 1 week and was told, "This is what we do here." You're going to suspend that kid? You're going to not let him play this year? That just doesn't make sense. And so while Rob probably would have liked to really discipline some of the players that were the main culprits, it just wasn't practical to go over the entire roster and make everyone pay for that.
Okay, so technically they're not going to be punished by Major League Baseball, but Tex, you know how the fraternity of baseball is going to look at someone like Jose Altuve, who in the 2017 postseason hit .472 at home and 143 on the road. Or an Alex Bregman, who was out there and had a bunch of stuff to say. You know how this is going to be. So tell us how those who played and those who are current playing are going to be looking at the Astros going forward and those core group of players.
This is a super uncomfortable situation. And it's the same thing that happens when you realize that the team that won the World Series the previous season had 2 or 3 players, tested positive for steroids the next season. And you go, "Man, I just lost the ALCS, or I lost a tight division title to a team that had all these guys on steroids." So what it does is it breaks teams up into 2 camps. You have the one camp that says, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. That's steroids, that's scuffing baseballs, that's stealing signs and using electronics to pass them along. That's one camp of athletes and baseball players in particular. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. Then there's the other group of guys that say, "I'm not having this on my conscience. This is not the way to play the game. I don't want to get caught. I don't want to be embarrassed in front of my family and fans and be a national attention grabber. I'm not going to be a part of this." So in the clubhouse and in between teams, it's going to be a very uncomfortable season for Major League Baseball.
Talking to Mark Teixeira with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Mark, to that end, had you been a player involved in all this, how do you think you would have dealt it? We asked Jessica Mendoza about this yesterday. There's been a lot of discussion about the nature of being able to come forward. And I know you said you commend Mike Fiers for what he did, but had you been a part of it? Because there are a lot of players that we think were around this and saw this that have said nothing for a while. So how would you have handled it as a player in one of these locker rooms?
I wish that I had the strength that Mike Fiers did to say that, if this would have happened on one of my teams, I would have stood up and said something eventually. But the fact of the matter is that 25 other players on the team and the coaching staff and even the front office in the Astros standpoint, they put a lot of pressure on you. I will say during my career, I had conversations with coaches when we were, trying to maybe a little bit too aggressively steal signs or relay signs. Say, "Hey man, what are we doing here? Why are we spending 40 minutes pregame trying to figure out what these signs are and taking away time for my preparation in the batting cage or in the weight room?" I mean, we would have meetings, 45 minutes to an hour meetings, just talking about how we can steal signs. And I never liked it. First of all, as the old school way of stealing signs where the guy on second base gets them and then relays them to the hitter only works half the time anyway, maybe even less than half the time. So I told my guys, listen, don't give them to me because I can guess 50% of the time right. So I just think that I wish I had the strength of Mike Fiers, but I'm not sure if I would have said anything because it's so difficult to go against that peer pressure.
It is because there's the line that sign stealing is part of the game. It always will be, but it's just using the technology to take it to this next level, which has everybody sort of up in arms. Tex, I know you're up against the clock, but I do want to ask you this one question. It's sort of an interesting time because it's the dead time before spring training. Pitchers and catchers report in less than a month. What do you expect to hear from the Astros? Because they can avoid it now, but they're not going to be able to avoid talking about this when they show up for spring training. What do you want to hear out of these guys like Bregman and Altuve and everybody else that was a part of this?
Well, I think anytime that you are accused of something that you didn't do, you don't wait until spring training to come out and say something. So if these Astros players are 100% innocent, and I really hope they are, because watching those guys perform on the field, the Alex Bregmans and the Jose Altuves of the world, that's good for baseball because they are incredible talents. They have swagger. They play with passion. So if they are innocent of these things, every single player from the Astros team in 2017 needs to make a statement. Do it through your agent, do it through a lawyer, do it through the team. But everyone needs to make a statement if you're innocent. If you're not, you better get your story straight because I think that Major League Baseball is going to have a second round of questioning here. And they basically told the guys the first time, hey, you get immunity if you tell the truth. If you don't tell the truth, we're going to have problems.
It's going to be a very, very interesting time when they show up and how this is all going to be received. Mark, we appreciate the time this morning. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, guys.
Getting interesting.
Right? I mean, it's really fine now because they don't have to say anything. Yep. And baseball's told them not to say anything.
I thought that was really interesting. Like, you think of how we get to this point with technology, with going that extra mile. And then you hear from Tex, we're having 45-minute meetings trying to decode signs and see what we can gather from that. Like, that level of obsession with something like that where you think you can find it is how you ultimately end up at this point.
You look for a line, you get that line, then you look for the next line, and then the next line.
There will always be line steppers. That's the one thing for sure in every sport, looking for a competitive advantage. Coming up, we're going to talk more about the sport we normally talk about in the middle and end of January. That would be who's going to the Super Bowl. And will this be the year for one person who's looking for one thing on his resume to make sure every box is checked? We'll get to that after SportsCenter.
Whip it near corner, Bogdanovich, shot fake, nearly went up and down, steal Eatwan! Eatwan front court one-on-one with Ingles, he walked.
Yes, he did.
They laid it up and in.
And one.
They laid it up and in.
Got away with the travel, but he gets down, draws the foul, and if that's Ingles, then Ingles is gone.
Eatwan took about 4 steps.
They were small ones, though.
ESPN New Orleans on the Call SportsCenter on Golic and Wingo. I'm Jason Fitz. The battle of 40-point scorers took place last night. Brandon Ingram chipped in a career-high 49 points. Pelicans edge past the Jazz 138-132 in overtime. He accomplished it in just 25 shots, which is tied for the second most points on 25 shots or fewer by any player at age 22 or younger in NBA history. As for the opposition, Donovan Mitchell showed up to the party also, tying his career high with 46 points. Marks the 4th time over the last 10 seasons that a game featured multiple 45-point scores. Let's move on to some football. Jimmy Burrow, the father of Heisman Trophy winner Joe, told Montreal's TSN 690 radio on Thursday his son has no problem wearing orange and black if the Bengals take Joe with the top overall pick in the NFL draft. Quote, he's excited to even be in that conversation, and if the Bengals do draft him, he's going to be happy. That's Jimmy Burrow telling the Canadian radio affiliate. Let's move back to the NBA today, which means we have to talk about Luka because he's awesome. Luka Doncic taking the floor tonight versus the Trailblazers. You can catch the game on ESPN at 9:30. That's Eastern Standard Time. Doncic 2-3 against Portland in his career, but he's put on a show in those 5 meetings, averaging 25 points, 9 boards, and 6 dimes. He'll look to match Damian Lillard's output. Dame Dollar scored at least 25 points in 9 straight games against Dallas. Portland 6-3 over that span.
51's the mark. Kansas City welcoming the Titans to Arrowhead with a
trip to Miami and the Super Bowl on the line.
They are not buying into the we're underdogs, everyone doubts us.
They've slayed 2 big dragons, right? The Patriots and the Ravens. I don't think anyone expected them to do that. Why not a third?
This guy's got notes on notes on notes.
Oh, you want to put your third corner on Tyreek Hill?
Night.
Coming near side, Tyreek Hill, touchdown, Kansas City.
That Chiefs Radio Network got laryngitis saying that on Sunday. Touchdown Kansas City, 7 straight possessions with a touchdown. That had never happened before in the NFL, and it's a big reason why the Kansas City Chiefs are hosting the AFC Championship game this Sunday as they take on the Tennessee Titans. And the symmetry here is just amazing. They played in Week 11 in the regular season. That was the last loss for the Kansas City Chiefs. It was Mahomes' first game back from the dislocated kneecap, and really the game that got the Titans on the roll that they find themselves in now, 1 win away from their second Super Bowl in franchise history. So what's going to happen on Championship Sunday in both games? For all of that, we're going to take the L right now. We're getting on the L train. We're going to bring in our ESPN NFL front office insider, Louis Riddick, who's ready for us. Louis, I mean, look, when people say, why do you call Patrick Mahomes Hall of Famer Patrick Mahomes? I'm just going to say, watch the first half of that game against the Texans and get back to me. What are your expectations for what we're going to see Sunday in Kansas City?
Wow, look, I expect there to be a lot of fireworks, Trey. I mean, obviously. I think Pat's going to put it up early and often. I think there's no question that, this game, despite the fact that, we make a lot out of Derrick Henry and we make a lot out of the fact that the running game at this time of year is something that is in vogue, right? It's something that that a lot of teams kind of revert back to because of the weather. It's cold. You want to have time of possession. You want to shorten the game, yada, yada. Look, the Kansas City Chiefs want to blow you wide open as far as the score is concerned right off the bat. So I expect them to put the ball up in the air and really test to see whether or not they can handle their speed and their big playability down the field. And in particular, I think that's what you need to look for with Kansas City is whenever you see Tyreek Hill in the slot, not at the X or the Z out on the perimeter, but in the slot in the middle of the field, whether or not Tennessee has a good answer for him, because they didn't in the first matchup, and he did rip him when he was lined up in that position. And then we haven't even talked about Sammy Watkins. We haven't talked about Travis Kelce, who arguably is the best tight end in the NFL. So I expect to see those guys really put it up early and often. As far as Tennessee is concerned, again, this is a football team. If you watch them in the divisional round against the Baltimore Ravens, what did they do? How did they get the lead in that game? They threw the football. This is one of the best teams in the NFL as far as taking shot plays down the field and really, I don't want to say lulling you to sleep as far as what the running game is concerned, because they don't necessarily do that, but really taking advantage of the fact that they have players who can produce big plays down the field, and Ryan Tannehill is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now across all metrics. So expect the ball in the air by both teams. We'll see if in the second half, when Derrick Henry usually, exerts his will on the opposing team, whether or not Kansas City is up to it, whether they're up to the challenge, then the best team will win. I expect Kansas City to win this football game because I don't believe that the Titans can match this football team now that they're healthy, score for score. We'll see how it plays out.
2 of the biggest targets of all 4 of these teams is Travis Kelce, who you mentioned, and George Kittle, the tight end for San Francisco. So take everybody on the field for a bit here, Louis. As a former safety on the field, what is the best way to neutralize or try and slow down these 2 receivers?
Look, I'll tell you this. When it comes to tight ends like this, you cannot allow them to play basketball against you and get position on you like a rebounder in basketball and just catch the ball in front of you. You have to front these guys right from the get-go, meaning get up on the line of scrimmage and reroute them as hard as possible, turn it into a street fight with good technique, of course, but then play underneath them and get between them and the thrower, and them and the quarterback, and then try and make sure you have good ball skills and you have good route recognition, you have good finishing skills to try and, come up with some PBUs, maybe an interception, and hold them to a minimum. If you get caught behind them, they're just too big and they're too fast. They're just going to box you out, and their catch radius is just too big, and they will just rack up stats on you. So I think taking the aggressive approach, without a doubt, is the way to go. Hopefully you have the requisite physical skills to kind of slow them down, meaning you're 6'1", 6'2", 210, 215, like I was, although I wasn't fast enough for these guys. But I'll tell you what, look, I played against guys like Keith Jackson, who go like, Keith Jackson was, with Miami, yes. And when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles, he was the standard. My very first start in the NFL came against Keith Jackson when he was in Miami with Dan Marino, with Clayton, with Duper when I was with the Falcons, and Jerry Glanville was like, you got him. What are you going to do? And and quite honestly, I had one of my best games of my career because I took that approach. Get up on the line, press these guys, and then play basketball, meaning front them and stay in between them and the thrower. Because if you don't, they're just going to put up big numbers and you're going to be embarrassed at the end of the game.
Big challenges for those secondaries. Talking to Louis Riddick with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, our ESPN NFL front office insider. Louis, where are we at with Aaron Rodgers right now? I think through the course of the season, we have seen this has not been, for the majority of the time, the same gunslinging risk taker, but a couple of big throws from this past weekend. What do you now expect going forward into championship weekend from a guy who is a sure Hall of Famer?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's interesting to talk about Aaron Rodgers as a safety net, but that's how I'm going to refer to him. Because I think this offense will run through Aaron Jones in particular, and the play-action game, the passing game, will flow off of that. And then if it gets to one of these situations where they get caught behind on the scoreboard and Aaron has to throw it, or they get in a situation where they feel as though they can exploit some matchups, they're pass protecting well enough, and they want to throw it a little bit more, there's no question, as Aaron showed you against the Seahawks, that this is a guy who can put some throws out there that just make you go wow and have your jaw hitting the floor. He's still that caliber. The interesting thing about it, though, is, and this is something he's alluded to all year long, is he doesn't have to be that guy all the time anymore, which is refreshing to him because they do have a good running game. They do have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And on the defensive side of the ball, they have two guys by the name of Zadarius and Preston Smith who can really get the ball back and play, I want to say lockdown. I don't want to say lockdown defense, but they can play high percentage defense in terms of getting off the field on third down and really making life miserable for the opposing quarterback. So he doesn't have to do everything on his own anymore, which I think is refreshing and kind of like, I guess it's comforting for him that he isn't always at the center of attention.
Talking to Louis Riddick with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Louis, before we let you go, something a bit away from the action on the field this weekend. Odell Beckham Jr. has the warrant out now for his arrest for the simple battery charge coming off the incident in the locker room after LSU's national championship game. If you are this new regime for the Cleveland Browns right now, how are you going about handling this?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, man. I mean, look, I don't think there's any playbook as far as handling it because look, this is a situation where it's one of those deals where it's kind of benign in nature as far as what he did, but at the same time, it takes away from what was obviously a tremendous championship weekend for the state of Louisiana and for LSU in particular. It takes away from that and puts the focus on someone who obviously was just trying to enjoy the moment and maybe cross the line as far as how, demonstrative he was in terms of his excitement, and now is in the spotlight again for something that is rather benign, that is being talked about explosively on national TV, on national radio, and that's just the kind of thing that you don't want when you're kind of circling back and you're bringing it to the Cleveland Browns. It's something that you don't want as a new regime coming in to have to answer questions about and have to deal with. You want to keep the conversation with Odell Beckham about being on the football field and what he's going to do under this new regime and help this team become what it needs to become. Not about whether or not, he acted the way he should act in a situation that really wasn't even about him. And here we are talking about that again. So I think you're just going to have the conversation with him, establish the relationship, which is always what it's about when you're talking about players like Odell. Establish the relationship of trust, set your expectations as far as how you think he should conduct himself. And hopefully he'll abide by that, and you're not backed into a corner and forced to make a decision that you don't want as far as removing him from your football team.
And listen, that's the discussion that they're going to have. We'll see how far that discussion goes. Louis, always good to talk to you, my friend. It's the best day of the entire year. We look forward to seeing it. We'll talk to you about it soon. Okay, thanks, buddy.
You got it. Thanks.
Looking forward to it, man. Really looking forward to it. All right, coming up, the baseball scandal has cost 3 managers their jobs, and we've got the receipts to show why they may no longer be employed. We'll get to that after this.
All right, enjoy the game of golf even more with a custom set of PXG clubs. Go to pxg.com to configure your clubs and buy. For a personal recommendation at your convenience, call 844-PLAY-PXG to speak to a PXG fitting expert. Or, for the full PXG fitting experience, schedule an in-person appointment with a local PXG master fitter. Call or visit our website to book now. PXG, nobody makes golf clubs the way we do, period. Back after this, Golic and Wingo.